Floyd.
Brianna Taylor.
Ahmaud Arbery. And the countless faces that we don't know as well, and the names that we don't know as well, but people that have suffered and sacrificed for decades, for generations, that we honor them today through part of what we're going to be here to do. Mark, if you'll open us with some words of welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us for our continuation of awareness to change. This is a nationality for Heart for Hospitality, and we just thank you guys for coming out and joining us this morning. I'd like to just take a brief moment just to thank our facilitators for continuing in this education path, and thank you guys once again for coming out and opening up your hearts and your ears to this training. Thank you.
So welcome. We are so glad to have you here today, and we have quite a number of people online with us as well. So at times, Chris Campbell over here is going to be monitoring online, and we'll turn to see if there are some comments or questions that we have from them as well. We have some roaming mics available for you today, and so for that, we ask if you have a short question in this room, please just go ahead and ask the question, and we will repeat it to make sure that our virtual audience can participate with that as well. If you'd like to make a longer comment, maybe tell a story of reference, just signal and we will run a microphone to you, because we would like for certainly the people virtually, and this is being recorded for others later, not to watch it and just see someone talking, obviously, and we're all reacting, but they cannot hear the words that you have to say. So again, if you have a little longer comments, just let us know with a microphone. I would like to begin by introducing Dr. Willette Burnham-Williams. Willette officially, in her role, is the Chief Diversity Officer at the Medical University of South Carolina. And she's held that post for a number of years, and before that, she was Dean of Students, working with students in much of the same field. The way I like to really introduce Willette, though, is in a very different way. She and I have partnered for quite a number of years in what I would say, from my standpoint, is my own learning journey. I've been, working in this field for quite a number of years, and I find that every year I look back at the year before and say, wow, look at what I didn't know. And how could I stand before a group of people and talk about something that I may not have known before? But in this journey, one thing we've learned is Willette and I, before our first session of this, had not seen each other for probably 3 months, other than virtually, as most of us have gotten very used to. And the first time we were in the room was for a session like this, and how hard it is not to go and hug somebody that you genuinely love and that you've walked the experiences with that we have. It's interesting because she does not know this in its own way. It continues to find ways to always remind us of the strength of the relationship. On the anniversary of Mother Emanuel AME, as emotions run high, our world is at a point of friction we may never have seen with social injustice. And what we find is emotions run really high, and ignorance can run even higher. And so you step into these things that you realize, okay, we're struggling with this, and then what happens is you see that when things are done with love and respect and listening, man, you know that overcomes all the other parts. But just so you know, that's the sort of thing that we hope to bring to you today, is that not only experiential learning, but also the relationship and the depth of care that we have for the subject matter that we're really talking about today with awareness to action. Be part of the change.
And so we want to remind you also that this is a safe place today. There aren't any questions that you cannot ask that will be judged or critiqued. We're here to all continue to learn and grow from one another. And so we ask you to be open and responsive to whatever is in your heart and whatever question comes to mind, because we will create for you a space today that will be safe for you to do that. And for those of you who don't know him, and I can't imagine there's anybody in this room that doesn't know my friend David McNair. This is David McNair, my friend and colleague. And I tell folks, and I told the group the last time we did a session. He's probably the only white guy I would do this work with because we have made such a great connection. I love him dearly. We had an experience recently that really, for me, cemented our connection. It was an opportunity for us to grow and learn more about, the impact of unintended biases and very narrow lenses that, again, I think have cemented our growth in terms of how we all respond to the work. David has done this for a very, very long time, and again, he's my friend and colleague, and we connect both spiritually and mentally, and he told me about a month ago we were still good as long as Mary, his wife, wasn't yet worried about, our connection to one another. So I feel good that Mary trusts me to do this work with him, and so together he and I are going to provide for you the opportunity, as I said earlier, to be safe and have a conversation and to put our words into actions and think about next steps in this very unprecedented time that we live in.
Yeah, to that point, have you all seen the State Farm commercial that's run for years where the wife comes down at like 2 a.m. in the morning and the husband's on the phone? Who are you talking to? He's like, Jake, it's State Farm. I think I get that from my wife. It's like, is that Willette? It's Willette, all right? It's all hours, doesn't matter, weekends, evenings. We're talking personally or professionally in some capacity. As we lead into these sessions, though, I have to tell you, with 17 years of the privilege of teaching in the field of diversity and inclusion, I don't think I was ever as nervous, uncomfortable, unsure, vulnerable as I felt us doing these sessions now. I've never known our country, I've never known families, friends, to be at such a point of strife and emotion. And we have always known that if we should stand before anyone else to share about a subject matter of inclusion, diversity, acceptance, respect, any of these things, it puts you in a place that it's very easy to hit a lot of tripwires. Very easy to hit a lot of tripwires. And I think especially so in the environment we are. So I just want to share with you that I may well say something that someone finds issue with. I hope not, but it happens. When so many words come out, it can happen. What I hope is, whatever happens, use this as a forum to speak up about it. Push back, challenge, let's talk. That is how we learn in going forward. But we do not come to this session lightly by any stretch for what it is that we have an opportunity to do if we strike the right balance, the right emotion, the right words. And it does take an awful lot of really honing those great listening skills that we have. I think it's appropriate to start with this on enough light. I do daily devotionals, and one of them that I struck before going into a situation, I had some reservations about the amount of conflict that was going to be following that day. And this was the devotional of that day, and I have since found it so appropriate for so many situations. This is by Henry Nouwen, if anyone follows. But I want to read the words because I don't want to paraphrase how important they are. Often, we want to be able to see into the future. We want to know, where will we be in 5 weeks, 5 months, 5 years from now? There are no sure answers to these questions. But mostly, we do have enough light for the next step. The light that, what do we have to do in the coming hour or the following day? And when we trust that we have enough light for the next step that follows, we can walk with joy and be surprised at just how far we go. In the context of today, reading those words, they take on a different meaning than the first time that I came across them. But I hope that we all can trust that if just a little bit of light is shed in one direction today, a little bit that you walk out of this room thinking, I can take a different action step as a result of what we discovered together today, then we'll be in a very good place. After that, I love to steal other people's words because they're so much better than mine. I received an email from Elijah Hayward at the International African American Museum, and he is the Chief Operating Officer. If you've not had a chance to meet Elijah, what a great person and resource we have in our community, kind of guiding that in its early days of formation. But his words, too, were so important to exactly what we were doing today. They said better than my thoughts were about what we're doing here today. So today we're in this cauldron of conflict and reckoning. And although many of the stories we share are informed by love and hope, they're rooted in unspeakable pain, and often we look to history for guidance on how we carry on in these watershed moments. It is a look back and a look beyond. That work of looking both ways to dispel ignorance, to diminish apathy, ultimately unify as a human race going forward through the experiences of those that came before us. The weight of holding systems accountable, reforming organizations, and educating is one that can be only shouldered if we work together as a community. Man, as we were contemplating what might be helpful at this time, particularly for our greater hospitality industry, and it's easy to get lost in our community, but today's focus, we do want to focus a little bit on what can we do, what can we hold accountable for, what can we educate within our greater hospitality community, because we're 40 to 45,000 strong in this community.
So education, reformation, and accountability are the foundation upon which we want to have our discussion today. I also want to be reminded of the virtual audience that is with us this morning. And I say to you all out there whom I can't see, we want you to participate fully and be engaged via the chat room that we're providing, and particularly in this next exercise as we begin to think about where we are in this moment today. David and I have decided to use technology as a tool to get a sense first and foremost about where we are in the moment. Because quite often what happens is we are so busy and so rushed to the next moment, we don't pay attention to what it is we are feeling right now and how that emotion might trigger the impact of what happens in the next moment. So we're going to pause, give you some instructions, and again, for those participating virtually, we ask you to write your response in the virtual chat, and we're going to have a conversation right now and get a sense about where you are in the moment.
So many forums, they say turn off your cell phones, put them away, and we're going to say pull them out, turn them on, get them ready. What I'd like you to do is pull out any device that you can text from that you may have with you today. And if you just go to your main screen, that's a picture of my main screen. On an Apple phone, it's the green icon like that for a text. If you'll just punch the button to send me a text. We're going to be asking you some questions, those of you online as well. We're going to be asking the questions. You can use your text phone, and your responses will also come live for us today. So we just got to get you signed on to this system. Once you are signed on to the poll, you will remain on for approximately a full day. It will eventually click you off. If you, at any time, want to click yourself off, you merely type LEAVE, L-E-A-V-E, in your text and send it, and you'll get a notification you're disconnected. I somehow forget to do that frequently, and it just finally times out. I can assure you, in no way are we tracking your devices. You will not receive one cell of marketing data from these devices. This is just merely your way to help communicate as a broader audience with questions we have for you today. So, to sign on, go to your text screen. In the iPhone, it's the upper right corner. You're going to do a new text because I'm probably not in your text screen, and I'm going to give you a special number to text me messages on today. So new text. Once you have a new text button, you'll have to enter a phone number at the top. For today, the phone number is the large red 37607. Just 37607 in the top phone number. That number will appear on every screen, so if for any reason you get bumped off, you'll see it to sign back on. Now, down in the actual text block, you'll want to type in red, McNair Group 678. Does not need to be capped. You can do it either way. I seem to do better with all caps. No spaces is the important thing. McNair Group 678. Hit send. Once you hit send, it should be about 5,000, 4,000, 3,000, 2,000, 1,000, and boom, you should be getting a message saying you have joined. I'm starting to see a few heads nod, so you're getting that message back. That's very good. Welcome. So we'll give just a moment. We're going to do first a test slide, so you'll get used to answering. We don't have a time meter on these, so just take your time to get in. If there's anyone not in and you feel comfortable masking up and stepping to the side to somebody that may be in and just getting some assistance, if not, just resonate with some of your vocal comments we have to share with what's on the screen. In this room, anyone not on that has been trying to get on? Okay, we'll see if we can get you connected. Mark, would you be able to assist? Thank you. So let's go to the first test slide and see what we have up here. You'll notice once the letters A, B, C, D appear, that means we're hooked in live. So the test question is the temperature in the room today. Is it ideal, A, too cold, B, muggy like a day in the South Sea, or don't ask because you're never going to please everyone, D? So you just merely enter the A, B, C, or D, hit your send button, and we can see that most people are finding it comfortable, but I bet it's going to shift some. I'm amazed because I find it very comfortable in here, and that usually means it's cool for those of you sitting there. So I'm glad that we have a few more comfortable. It is rare that we get into 70 or 80% all on one bar. We see that we have different answers. So you can see how it participates. Those of you virtually, you certainly can answer the question just to make sure that it seems like you're hooking in as well, but we'll go to a little bit more important question kind of as we move forward. So we have about a 15-second delay for those virtually responding. So I will leave them up there a little bit longer. It's a great time if somebody does have a question you'd like to ask at the introductory part of today. This could be a good opportunity to do it. Any questions? All right. Well, let's get into the other part. So it's a little small and tight, but what we'd like you to do is please enter one word. That's the important part, one word to describe how you feel at this moment. And when I say at this moment, not here in this room or those of you at home sitting in your chair, but over the last week. If you had one word that expressed how you've been feeling over the last week, please enter that word and hit send. You may do as many words as you like. So if you see another word on the screen that you think, wow, that's me, that said it better than I did, you can retype that word and hit send. If there are 4 or 5 emotions hitting you, just type them separately and hit send. What happens is it starts to form a word cloud. The words, the larger they are, means the more often that word has been represented. Again, for those online as well as those in the room, it's good to have a little thought about how are we feeling over this last week. And let's acknowledge that. Well, Led, as they're on the screen, anything hits you?
I would say overwhelmed is probably the place most of us find ourselves in, so it's not surprising that one, and anxious and exhausted are appearing very large on the screen, which means many of us are experiencing that at the moment. And the only other thing that strikes me is it's so diverse. I mean, the responses are all over the place, from determined to heartbroken, and that's not extraordinary for again, the times that we're in. So I thank you for your honesty and for sharing.
And I love, too, within there, we see words like eager, hopeful. We also see the word ashamed. I don't know that there's a single emotion I'm reading up there that I haven't somehow been like a pinball machine bouncing around between all of these emotions. And as Willette and I were just preparing this morning, we said, it seems like I'm having more trouble either reciting numbers, having a memory for dates. So there's such a distraction going on in the head. I don't know if you're feeling the same thing, but it's not our routine. So the brain is working differently, and that distraction is affecting us all. I thought it would be helpful to share with you the word cloud from the group that we held about a week and a half ago.
Very similar.
That was their words. A lot of similarity, isn't it?
Very much.
Just to prep you, what we're going to ask you to do is at the very last slide of today, we're going to ask you for the same exercise of one word, how you're feeling now, meaning in this moment. And I think you will find, not to bias you, but we may have some very different words on the screen. So our next hour and a half or so together, we're really excited about.
So we're going to ask you now to take a moment and participate in an exercise practicing social distancing. We want you to join with maybe one person or 2 at the most and discuss these 2 things. We want you to first share what you're feeling, and then why you believe you're feeling what you do. This is again about getting you to think about what you're feeling and why these are the things that you're experiencing right now. So we're going to ask you to pair up with someone, please, just as much as you can kind
So
of
please do wear masks.
wear your mask, and
Or
just
as the virtual ones,
chit-chat.
you can chat in through.
Folks in the virtual world, we ask you to please answer the questions in the chat. First, share what you are feeling. Write down your thoughts in the chat, please. Good time.
Anything so far from the chat room? Thank you.
I want to invite you to welcome back. It's always wonderful to see such enthusiasm when we ask you to pair up and begin to have a conversation early in the morning. Now's the opportunity, though, for us to share, to the extent that you're comfortable, some of what you shared in your conversations a few moments ago. And we'd like to begin with the first question. What are you feeling? Anyone, please.
I'd like to add in here, too, if what struck you was the words you heard from the person that you were speaking with, then sometimes that's the more interesting to also share. The only thing we ask is, if you and I were speaking, just give some eye contact and say, okay, if I say what you shared with me, so that it's okay to hear what someone heard through someone can also be a really powerful way to share. So Mark has the additional microphone. If you would, just raise your hand, please, and we'd love to hear what you gained from hearing from the other person about what they were feeling and why, or your own experience. Thank you,
Great,
Jack.
thank you.
Do you mind just quickly introducing yourself as well?
Good morning. I'm Jack Case with Kiawah Island Golf Resort, and we discussed the word overwhelmed, and really the uncertainty of really just what's next and how far is what we're dealing with going to go as far as the pandemic, and really just the uncertainty of each day. And I think that's we also have to just continue to move forward as well. So that's really kind of the crux of what we talked about.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Skipper Condon I'm in the restaurant business, whatever. The feeling I have is frustrated because, I think that this is a weird thing to say, but I think the pandemic has been good for us. And in that respect, I mean, it forces us to be a lot more emotional, a lot more frustrated about things. And it brings up things that we wouldn't have thought of. For example, years ago, when some of these other incidents happened, everybody got irate about a certain incident, and then it died down. Then another one would happen, and everybody gets frustrated, and it dies down. I think the reason why things are not dying down is the pandemic, because it's got everybody so upset and so frustrated and so much angst. And so in a way, it's a good thing, because it may cause this thing to boil over to a point where we do something about it.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you
you.
for sharing. While we're getting the mic, I will share with you in response to that. This pandemic certainly has made me and the community that I spend most of my time in at MUSC realize that all those things we said we could never do virtually, we refuse to teach except face-to-face. And as you said, it has made us realize that we really are pretty nimble and flexible, and we can rise to the challenge when we have to, because we provide so much for so many others. You have to do that. And so while very frustrating, boy, have we addressed the learning curve like none other. And that is a good thing.
I'm Lynn Lassane. I'm in the hotel and restaurant business, and my comment was emotional, and I think it's emotional with sadness, fear. There's so many terms emotional. And my partner Barbara said hopeful. And then we ended it with talking about that where is the answer to handling these horrific situations without so much anger? If we could have less anger with both sides of everyone coming to the table, I think, and so much destruction in what it's doing to our history, I think somehow someone has to find the answer to less anger so that we can have real solutions, so we can have some resolve. Yes. I feel like that's what we talked about.
Thank you.
And getting to the answer isn't easy because first we have to work through all these emotions that we're sharing today. And I will share with you all also what I shared with someone recently. And anger is good too. I mean, you know, if we suppress that and pretend like we're not feeling the anger and the hurt and the frustration and all those other things, and only focus on the hope and the next steps, we really miss another opportunity for better understanding around what is it that angers us? Why are we so conflicted? And so thank you all for sharing, and know that, you know, for me, every emotion is a valid emotion, and we have to embrace them, whether they're embarrassing to us or not, because they're real and they're what's going to propel us to action.
I don't know how many of you follow Jim Collins, wrote the book Good to Great, and someone asked him recently, with all that you've done in studying and interviewing, how do businesses, organizations work through this? How do communities work through this? And he said there was one thing that stood out most through his history of learning, and it's the Stockdale paradox. And if you're not familiar with the Stockdale paradox, it's Admiral Stockdale, and it really, in simple forms, if I can try to fairly paraphrase it, this is not the first time in history we have faced really, really difficult times. It's not the first time in history we've questioned, I don't know what's coming next. I don't know if it's going to escalate, de-escalate, plateau. I don't know. And that's what creates a whole lot of angst in any situation. And he said something that really sparked me, because I hadn't thought about this. I've read the Stockdale paradox before. It didn't stick with me now. They said some of the people who do land to be the most ineffective at leading change are those people that were total optimists, who lived in the world of, but it's going to get better. We're all going to learn, because they quickly get defeated from that complete optimist point of view and realize it's not happening today, tomorrow, next week, certainly on a timetable I thought may be realistic, and they end up getting defeated and become less effective. It does not mean in any way, according to the Stockdale paradox, that we don't have hope, that we don't live with a vision of unity and better place, but that we are realistic and we are fueled by the emotions to tackle what's ahead of us, to think about what actions can lead to change. So it'll be really interesting. For all comments made, the hardest part is there's not a right or wrong. There's not emotions that's on one side or on the other side.
Right.
They're all part of it, and the acknowledgement and the listening and the processing of those must take place before the rational action steps begin to fall into place. And every time we think we may step there, some other event may spark emotion back. And we have to acknowledge that that is part of the process we go through.
Can we go to our virtual participants for a moment and get a couple of
perfect timing
responses?
Anytime you see a cue on the screen is to let us know. Let's check in with our virtual audience as well. Chris?
We had quite a few. Anger and frustration, mixed with hope and gratitude. Feeling hopeless is easy during these times as we hear more and more updates of what's going on. Feeling a sense of responsibility to educate those around me, those we work with, and trying to forge a positive path forward. Motivation, having seen so much of the protests and others, people taking to the streets and these important dialogues, it's inspirational, and how to use my skills and privilege to do more. Gratitude, the times are uncertain. The positive parts of life are a good way to deal with that adversity. This individual loves to say it's hard to be hateful when you are grateful. And then a sense of overwhelm and uncertainty as to where to start, but hopeful and inspired after seeing so many people come together and have real, raw conversations.
Great.
Great.
A great summary, Chris. Thank you. I want to move to another question. So, how are your emotions presently driving or affecting your behaviors? So this just isn't what are you feeling and being attentive to that. How do you find they're driving your behavior? So we have a few answers. A, they're immobilizing me to a great extent. I know that. I feel that. B, they're bringing more anger than I would want. C, feeling fear for what lies ahead. D, it's bringing hope. E, driving positive change. F, something else. It's not on the screen. The hardest thing that I've asked you to do is pick just one, right? As you can see through the diversity of answers, one may have been Tuesday morning, the other was Tuesday afternoon,
Right.
the next was Wednesday morning. We're all on this roller coaster of what we're feeling, when one day it may be hope and another it's anger to frustration. But we saw a very similar divide with the first group that we did, and it's because it's hard to force what's the primary thing. Part of today is working towards, in a very tight timetable, something that drives change. So we just sort of have a process that'll work us in that direction. Chris, just checking in, anything else coming across from some of the? Start blind spots, Willette.
So what are they? For me, the answer simply is not knowing what you don't know and how it impacts others. Quite often, particularly most recently in the last 5 or so years of my career, I feel like the term blind spots has been overused and misrepresented and sometimes even misunderstood. And attached with that, there's this guilt. And so we want to begin by making sure everyone knows that we all have them, these things that we don't know that are impacting others in ways that we didn't intend. And this vision or the way of seeing the world, because of our life experiences and our cultures and our backgrounds and on and on and on, it's those things that impact us in ways that we are not always fully aware of. They are these things that David's going to share with you. And I just wanted to say one thing before David starts. And it's real important to me because I think it's real important for us as we begin to have a conversation about moving to action to just own that we all have blind spots. And we go back to the whole conversation around emotion, because a lot of times when we're so caught up in our emotion, we really become even more unaware of the blind spots that are impacting the people in some instances we want to help the most in ways that isn't helpful. So when you begin to think about the blind spots, the most effective way to work through them to action is to just embrace the fact that there's no one in the room who doesn't have them about something or some group.
If you feel you do not have a blind spot, would you just see one of us afterwards? Because we want to have a whole separate conversation. I don't think we'll be chatting with anybody afterwards. I like to read this particular definition backwards. Failure to exercise good judgment. We all do that. And it comes from the fact that we were totally unaware of something that may exist within us and we didn't know that it did. How could we then have curbed something differently? But what happens is we failed to exercise good judgment as a result of it. Those subconscious attitudes, stereotypes, they affect our understandings, our actions, our decisions. I think by the time we leave here today, many of us may be at a higher level of awareness at the power of our unconscious mind, the enormity of what is buried in the unconscious mind, and it is driving behaviors every single day that we may consciously have rationalized as a correct behavior when it was a failed behavior. Evidence shows this implicit bias pervasively intersects the way that we hire, the way that we select. It just intersects so many different places in our day-to-day actions.
So what does this look like to you? Think about it for a moment. So what is it that stops us from having this perfect vision that we all want to have about one another? It's all of these things here. First and foremost, it's the misinformation that we learned very early on about other groups that are not groups of our own. And we've all learned those things. I don't know if you guys have seen the video that's gone viral again of the two little boys who haven't seen each other in a long time. They run to each other and they hug. One is a black little boy, one is apparently a white little boy. And they're just so excited to see each other. And it's at that raw age when they don't have blind spots, you know, and then we lose that because we begin to learn things that's misinformation about groups and others that totally then begins to blind us to all of the wonderful things that we bring and everyone brings to every life experience. It's all these things. For me, again, one of the most obvious ones about what is it that obstructs our vision sometimes is not only the misinformation, but loneliness and contempt. You know, what is it like when you live in a world where there's no interaction? What has it been like during this pandemic, you know, when we've been sequestered into our homes or in our offices with nobody else is coming into the office but us? That puts us in a frame of mind that begins to shape the perspective of others that we then begin to interact with slowly but surely. Again, we all have obstructed visions, and these are just some of the ways that we're impacted by what it is we see and how we interact with groups unlike our own.
I like to use this as sort of a pilot checklist. All of these things may apply, but I like to go down through them and say, if you were going to circle 2 or 3 that you feel are shaping where you have potential blind spots, the more acutely aware of it we are, the better. Is it the culture that you're working in? Is it the life experiences that have brought you to the table? Is it the immediacy of events that we're having that are bringing about the anger? Whatever it may be, pick 2 or 3 to begin being more aware of, to recognize that's possibly where my blind spots come from. I'm going to show you now a picture. I'm going to keep it on screen for approximately 5 seconds. If you have seen this picture before, please do not participate in the polling afterwards. After 5 seconds, I'm going to ask you, what did you see in that picture? And if you saw nothing, say nothing. If you saw the galaxy, say the galaxy. Whatever you believe you saw in that 5 seconds. Again, I do ask, virtually or in the room, if you've seen it before, and I'll explain why, please do not respond, all right? So the poll comes up. What did you see in the previous picture? And this is just an open text screen, so you'll just start seeing as people saw something up there. Go ahead and let us know what you saw.
And David, I don't think our virtual community didn't see the screen, did they?
I hope they did.
Were they? Okay.
Do you have any check? Last time there was a little transfer on the virtual community. Great, it's some small type in there, so I'll help read them out for the group. So nothing, animal with a tail, a map of land and water, a map. Yeah.
Question marks.
I saw black and white, more maps.
Oh, lots of maps.
Land. Interesting, woman lying down.
Wow. Nothing.
Just nothing.
Aerial
love it, aerial view of
map.
farmland.
Oh, that's a new one. A reclining lady.
So let's take another look at it. What we're going to do is we're going to shed light on the very same picture, exact same picture, but we're going to raise the exposure level to share light on it and then see what you may see. If you saw a map, if you saw a reclined woman, whatever it was, and now you're seeing something different, go ahead and just shout it out what you see now. Cow. Isn't that interesting?
And no one saw the cow at first. At least you didn't acknowledge that you had.
So there's only one other addition I want to point out for a very good reason, other than raising the exposure. What did the exposure, doing the light, adding it into the situation, it eliminated all of the clutter and shadowing that was interfering with being able to see what was right in front of us. Interesting, isn't it? However, there was one other detail added. If you look along that jawline, that was added to give that one point of definition. And the reason I think that is so cool, how many times when something starts to become more clear, maybe you made a comment, and that comment all of a sudden provided that line of definition that now I'm able to see something I did not see before.
David, would you go back just for a second to the original?
I'm going to show back to the original. Now you see the cow.
Is there anyone who doesn't see the cow now that you've seen the other?
Okay.
And usually
look at
that happens, yep.
And that's the original. My guess is if they continue to add a line definition around the jaw, it would make it a lot easier on the first run. What happens is Everyone's brain processes differently. But once it has processed, you're going to now have that in there as a recognition. And as much as 5, 6, 8 years from now, someone could flash that up and you're immediately going to see the cow and you'll have a hard time ever looking at it again and not seeing the cow. I think that's one of the most encouraging things we can learn today is when light sheds, gets rid of the clutter that was not allowing us to see what was in front of us. Maybe one point of definition helped us see it, and now that we've seen it, we got it. And the brain will remember it clearly in that way. So it's a real interesting study. Carl Dellenbach started with this. He was literally the editor of the American Journal of Psychiatry for over 40 years. He worked in that institution over 50 years, taught extensively in the field, and really started to study the effects of what happens in these situations. And we really look at two words that I think put it in our simplest language, and that is stimulate, simulate. Simulate, stimulate. Stimulate, simulate. Doesn't matter what order you put them in. What happens is when all of a sudden we are stimulated in one way and we simulate a behavior that works in that manner, we will continue to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. Mostly through our day, we aren't really thinking about what we're doing. We were completely unconscious that our eyes may have rolled, that we had an expression of boredom, that whatever may have taken place, we aren't even aware that that is taking place. Do you remember as a child when we all played the game of flinch? It's like you put your palms this side up and I'm going to hover mine over it and you're going to try to slap me. And what happens is I put my palms out there and I'm going in and I'm going in and I'm flinching all the time because you caught me the first time. And you didn't even move a bit, but I'm flinching the whole time. Stimulate, simulate. The brain has now realized that is not what I want to have happen, so I'm going to be much more quick to retract. It's a really interesting thing. So I try not to get too scientific about it just because I have to admit I love this. At any given moment, your brain is processing 11 million sensory triggers. Can you even get your head around that? At any moment, processing 11 million sensory triggers. Between what you see, you smell, you taste, you hear, and you feel, 11 million. Out of that, your brain really only sends signals for about 40 to 50 at any given time. Guess how many consciously hit most of us at that same moment? 10 to 12. So you want to guess how much we miss happening around us? And the 10 to 12 are mostly being set in our minds and in our feelings because it touches on something we've experienced before. Stimulate, simulate. It's really crazy to think how much there is we don't know, we don't see, because it didn't process to us.
Yep.
It's really, really fascinating. So let's put it in another context. I'm not going to walk you through this exercise, but I want you to look in the middle. If I ask you to say out loud, what do you see in the middle of those three symbols? What do you see? We had no problem seeing a B at all, did we?
No.
What happened if instead I showed you this slide? I see 13, right? We see things in the context even though no difference.
Absolutely none.
Not a bit. Put them side by side. It's the same. So we see things in a context. That context can get very distorted even though I saw the very same thing. What if the very same thing was in a very different context, right? So if you were going to say for a moment, what profession is this? Yeah, some said medical, some said clinician, some said physician.
Some
Can't
said
tell you
pharmacist.
working more than 40 years around a hospital how many times I'm called doctor. Why? Because I'm male. I'm walking the halls of a hospital. I get called doctor. I've corrected it thousands of times across 40 years of walking through hospital hallways. We see things in context. If I were to ask you to be so bold to say, what type of medical person do you think this is? If you were just going to tell the story of this particular person, what kind of physician or medical clinician do you think it is? Is it a physical therapist, pharmacist, surgeon? Pharmacist. General practitioner. Mm-hmm. If you, don't have to say it out loud, but if you started to think, what kind of car does this person drive? If you were going to list 3 models of car you think this person drives, what might it be? Interesting. Anything else hit you? If you were guessing in some scenario what you think the income of this person is, could you give a range? All to say, exact same person, different context. If I asked you the profession, if I asked you the car they drove, if I asked you the income, what happens is we are living in a world that unfortunately is very focused on visual. Very focused on visual. And the minute that visual gives us something of context that may resonate, that we didn't even know that it resonated, boom, we're there. How complex is this that we are all dealing with? I don't know how many of you are familiar with the amygdala. The amygdala is literally one of the most archaic parts of our brain. It's actually amygdalae because there are 2 of them. Imagine taking 2 almond nuts off a plate. That is representing the 2 amygdalae that sit in the frontal lobes of your brain. They process those most immediate reaction and send it out through the brain as to what to do with it. And let me tell you, they process a lot of emotion. And it's really fascinating to see when you begin to understand what breaks through, what is driving me and my behavior, and I'm totally unaware of it. Not only do you have what is there experientially, you have there what is genetically at the same time. If you are right-hand dominant, you give more preference in your listening and selection of things to your right versus your left. If you're merely interviewing 2 candidates, you may select a less qualified candidate because they're sitting on your right if you're right-hand dominant and you were totally unaware of that. How you stand beside people, whom you talk to, whom you listen to, all are being in context, sometimes genetically, sometimes through our life experiences. But we're totally unaware that they're driving the behaviors in the first place. It's crazy, the things we don't know. So let's try a little bit of
Another exercise.
being vulnerable.
Yeah.
It's not always easy to write on your lap. So if you don't have a pen or it's not easy to write, you can do this mentally. Due to COVID, we're not handing out pieces of paper and collecting them, so we want to do this a little bit virtually and ask also that our online does. So if you can write it down, the tactile approach of writing it down means more. You're not handing it in to anybody, but it will mean more for you. So what I'd like you to do is write down 3 to 5 physical identifiers. In other words, if I was saying, oh, we're talking on the phone and I want to meet you in a public crowded place, you'll notice you can see me by. How would you give 3 to 5 physical identifiers for someone you've never met if you were meeting in a public place? Write what those would be for you. I usually say, I'm male, I'm white, I'm bald. They'll find me.
We're also going to ask you then to write down 3 to 5 of your values that absolutely guide the way you live. What are the values that guide the way you live?
And then for kicks, add on to that 3 to 5 passions. What's your passion in life? Passion about hobby, occupation, what gives you energy, outlet, anything. Now, what we won't do in the room today because of our environment, and it's a shame because I think this can be really, really interesting to hear, but we ask you to find one other person in the room, just walk up to them. It's nicest if you don't know them at all, and just walk up, and Adam and I just switch our sheets. So I now have Adam's, and he has mine, and what we have to do is look on the sheet, and I want you to circle what is it that most interests you about this person you've never met. What is it you might imagine that you're going to circle? Is it the fact that I'm male versus female, or vice versa? Is it the fact that I'm white versus African American, or vice versa? The fact that I wear glasses or don't wear glasses? Or was it something in the value system? Was it something in the passion? And unfortunately, that is not seen. Layer that on with the fact that if today I meet Lynn for the first time and we're approaching each other to meet, that first 7 seconds, which is mostly visual, she and I are forming almost 12 impressions of each other based on what? Visual. Visual. It is so weak, it is so not who you are, and yet every interaction that begins to take place has to overcome or support those initial 12 influences that you've already given to me. And you know what? Influences is the nice word. Sometimes I use the more real word, which is judgments. I have 12 judgments and you have 12 judgments. And those judgments could be positive judgments about our conversation. They could not be positive judgments. But everything that takes place. And when you first meet somebody, did you ever have the chance to say, could you share with me your 3 values that most drive your life? That just doesn't come up, does it? But my guess is, if in this moment we shared our 3 top values, or we shared our 3 top values, or we shared our 3 top values, I bet we would start to form a connection that spoke over and above any of what we saw in that first 5 to 7 seconds. So how do we, in building unity, which leads us to action, start to realize where do we have our power? And it's in our aligned value systems. It's really, really strong. That might be something you would be interested in taking back to your own workplace. 3, 3, and 3. It's very interesting. Chris, just checking in online? Great.
So now we're going to move to action and try to keep our focus on things we can control, and specifically those things in our hospitality community. So I want you to think just for a minute, if you will, about the emotions that you expressed earlier this morning that you were feeling, and then how those emotions translated to behaviors that now you are demonstrating because of the emotions. And then couple all of that and package that in a way that helps you begin to think about, in the midst of all of this stuff that I'm feeling and the way that I'm behaving, how do I focus on an action or action steps that I'm in control of that are going to help me support the industry that I love? I want to offer you a few tidbits as we begin to have this conversation about moving to action. It's real important that you first sometimes just listen and know that action doesn't necessarily mean fixing anything. What we often do, particularly when we're dealing with people and teams and groups that are unfamiliar to us, is we want to go straight to the action and the fix. And sometimes what the people closest to you in your industry want first is an acknowledgement that you see them and you hear them. And they don't want you to fix anything. They just want you to be present. And you can control that. So I ask everyone to begin with, that thing that you really can control is providing a comfort level and a space for people where they feel they're valued, that they're heard, and that it's okay to be in that space. So I want you to start with that when you think about your actions and know the very important part about that. For those of you in the room who are Southerners, you know, we have this mantra immediately when we meet someone, how you doing? And you just keep right on going, good morning, how was your day? And you never pause to really listen to, did she not hear I said I'm feeling terrible today? We just say, how you doing, and keep it moving. I want to share with you that in this pandemic space we live in, this space of social unrest, when you ask someone how they're doing, and particularly if there's someone in your industry currently, you need to stop and wait for the answer and give them the time to tell you how they're doing, and then hear that. Because people really want to feel they have a space where when someone asks me how I'm feeling, they really care, and they're going to pause in that moment and let me express that. And they're going to not try to fix it, because in the Southerners, the other thing we want to do is, well, baby, what can I do to help you? That's not what people want right now either. They just want the space to be heard, to genuinely feel that care and concern, so you can move to action. I see a hand.
That's just praise. Being in the event planning business and all my business being going, people are asking me, how you doing, checking on you. You know, what's the situation with you? And I said, not worth a damn. It's terrible. It's horrible. And they say, what can we do? I said, nothing, pray. But we all going to be okay. But thank you for asking.
Yes.
Thank you for listening, because it helps me to be able to vocalize that.
It does,
You
and
know?
it's very important.
And we can all say, oh, just fine, we can be good. It's such beautiful weather this what we've had, you know. We hope we don't get a hurricane, but it's bad.
Yeah, and tell the truth. That's
And
the
tell the
other
truth.
thing.
You gotta
yes.
tell the truth.
Thank you so much for sharing. People really want to know the truth, and they're okay with that. David?
I think these visuals really spoke to me as well, because unfortunately in our polite society, we sometimes live these out. The upper picture with the mask on, I never lie, but yet written on her face is, I lie. Written on the mask is, you know, I am not afraid, but written on her face is, I am afraid when I move the mask. We have a way of very publicly putting forth what we would like to be seen, and sometimes privately not having exactly that in who we are. So it's important that action steps, as Willette said, self-reflection is a huge one. I've had a lot of self-reflection. For what I know in my own conscious mind, I could rate on a scale of 10 where I believe I feel in terms of, am I a racist? When asked the question, am I an anti-racist? I start to contemplate and reflect more. Where did my actions show that? What did I hear that I let lie and didn't speak up? What happens for all of us when we begin to self-reflect on certain things? It's a complicated world.
Yes.
Being openness to vulnerability is probably one of the hardest things we do, and particularly in our professional world, to be open to it is really hard. So we have this sense that if we put forth this, others will see us that way. It can help us in moving forward. The courage it takes to be vulnerable, the strength it takes to be vulnerable, but the bonding and unity it creates when we are vulnerable is amazing.
Yes.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a powerful thing to work towards. So whether it's reflection, vulnerability, partnerships, accountability, we want to do this just to spark you, because I'm going to ask you another very unfair question. I'm going to ask you to select from a list kind of where it is that you're moving, and it's hard to select just one, and we recognize that. Willette, anything before we go to the list?
I just want to close with the one about risk-taking. It's everything you're going to do when you begin to think about moving to action, we know is risky, particularly given the time and the space we're in right now. But you've got to be a risk taker. And everything above that line there that says continuous risk-taking is intersected and connected very, very importantly to that piece. This is no time for us to be safe. And if you haven't felt it yet, you're going to feel it as we continue to move through whatever the next 5 to 6 months or even a year has for us in terms of not only our industries, but in terms of our personal lives. So please be willing to take a risk. That's going to be the thing that propels us into action, I believe.
So I'll read it because the type may be small for people in the back of the room. The question is, action can take many forms. What strikes you as to where we collectively need to set our priorities in the hospitality community? A, reflection, listening, dialogue. Is that the priority? B, awareness, education. C, reformation, activities for change. D, drive accountability in what we know is systemic. E, something else is coming to mind. Where do you believe in the priorities of the hospitality community we should focus?
So we're asking our virtual community to please put your responses in the chat.
So those that are with us virtually, you can text into your text feature of your mobile device and represent here. You don't need to duplicate it in the chat at the same time, but if you don't have a texting feature, please do add it to the chat in the virtual community.
Oh, thanks for that clarity. I apologize. Wow.
It's interesting. As I said, it's a very unfair question. So I would love anyone that says, like, I struggled with this because this was hard, or I didn't like that you put in listening with reflection, because listening is different than reflection, obviously. So we know it's a little bit unfair, but we're just trying to see where some collective heads are.
Should have added all the above.
Yeah, all of the above. There you go. I think we'll do that for the next one. Thanks, Lynn. But we do see here, and as we compare this form with the last form, we want to sense when we begin to provide opportunity for community to come together and act, what can be most helpful. The awareness and education is such an important part. If we try to drive into action and we aren't fully aware and educated on it, if we haven't processed the emotions going on in the room first, it's very hard, and we can actually slow down the action process. Right. But as Willette said, reflection is action. Listening is action. Education is action. Certainly accountability, everyone's going to say, if we don't have teeth in the ultimate system, we may be right back here again, right?
Absolutely, and I will tell you, one of the things that I've discovered is that we don't all define accountability the same either. And then the question for me becomes, who's going to hold people accountable and for what? We've been looking recently at some of our policies, and that's the driving question. Everybody wants us to drive accountability, but when you start to bear down and say, well, who should be held accountable and who's going to make sure that happens, then we begin to backpedal. Because it's, again, an opportunity for risk-taking that no one wants to be the person and the implementer of the accountability piece, and it's essential. Because when you hold people accountable, you become the what? I tell folks at MUSA, I get paid to be the bad guy, so I'm okay. I look at Title IX, I'm ADA. When you see me, people see compliance. I'm the federal, overseer. But somebody's got to do it, and so be careful when you talk about driving accountability to be thoughtful about what exactly are you defining accountability as, and are you one of those people that's going to be taking the reign for holding others accountable for whatever it is you've defined as needing that accountability? Yes.
So as Willette steps into this final, very powerful exercise, yeah.
We had
Chris.
an online question. If we could flip back to the responses, if they still show. The question was, can A and B be done simultaneously?
Absolutely would be my answer.
Absolutely, yes.
So can A and B be done simultaneously? Absolutely. A number of these things can take place simultaneously, but there is a certain sequence to it as well, meaning it's hard to drive into activities for reformation if we haven't first had the education, the awareness, the listening, the reflection, and so forth. So there is a bit of a nature, but it can take place at the same forum, if you will, same time.
Just want to caution the person asking the question, though, you don't want to get bogged down in reflecting education and awareness, because that's a real safe place to be sometimes. And you could stay there for the next 5 years. Let's become aware and educated. Let's reflect. And then no action really happens. And what I know people want to see ultimately is really more tangible kinds of actions. And I often have folks tell me, well, you know, how much D&I education and training are we going to do? When are we going to really do the work? So be aware that, again, even though we know that these are actionable steps, reflecting awareness education, you don't want to get bogged down there in that safe space of doing just that.
Great point. So as Willette steps into this final and what I would say is a very important and powerful exercise combined together, I want to just underscore the instructions. As you spend your time, think about things you can have control in, and think about things that are affecting our hospitality community. Willette?
So we want you to take 8 minutes and 46 seconds to do something positive. I know there's probably no one in the room who isn't aware now of what 8 minutes and 46 seconds represents in our American society. During the 8 minutes and 46 seconds, we're going to ask you to join with 2 or maybe 3 others, again at a safe distance, to come up with 2 to 3 suggestions that you believe we need to act upon now. So we're going to first ask you to pair up, and then we'll start the timer for 8 minutes and 46 seconds of a conversation around action steps that we can begin now. 2 to 3.
And none too small, none too large.
And everything is relevant. Oh. I love that they're interacting well. Oh, good. Okay. Okay. We'll get some response from the. For some reason, my heel is hurting. Welcome back. Welcome back. So as not to lose the significance of the 8 minutes and 46 seconds, we just want to ask you to reflect just for a moment on just how long that felt. We did a gathering at MUSC about 2 weeks ago now, and we just asked people to come out to some green space on campus and kneel or sit or stand, whatever was appropriate for them, for 8 minutes and 46 seconds in silence. And we got to about 5 minutes, and I looked at my colleague, and he was doing like David was doing in terms of holding the timer up to me, and I couldn't believe we still had 3 minutes and 46 seconds more to go. Time is critical, is our point, and it's important sometimes to understand just how long what seems like a short time might be. As you begin to think about your next steps that we're going to discuss now, I'm going to ask you to make it a part of your process to be timely, and whether that means to be timely in terms of giving more time to an action or the discussion and contemplation and implementation of an action, or whether that means being more expedient, because in that moment it's important to do that to be able to get to a place where people need to be, but be cognizant of just how very important time is in terms of moving forward with your actions. We're going to ask you now to have a conversation with us and share some of what you discussed in your groups, because this really is your time to talk and reflect, to communicate with one another as we begin to talk a little bit for the time we have left today about what next steps look like, what those actions mean, what's doable, what's not doable, and how you then move from where we are today to a call for action.
So Mark lost about 5 pounds last time we did this because he was running back and forth like a track star, passing the microphone around. I hope you feel as comfortable as the group did that day to share. This part of sharing thoughts on action steps, even if it's just floating an idea, feel free to react to an idea. This is an open forum. So if anyone would like to begin with some of your thoughts, and then we'll turn to our virtual community as well. But if you'll share some of your action thoughts. Thank you, Jim.
Well, I probably can't speak for the group, but for me, I'm appreciative of y'all putting on this training. And I think if anything, what I received out of this is asking questions, listening, and listening with respect. And that's what I think I would like to do as an action item. I know that's not concrete or hard, but that's where I'd like to start.
Great. It's a very good beginning. Others?
I think eye-to-eye engagement is important. And I think the engagement from the white community to the black community proactively is important. Looking people in the eye to start is important.
Yes.
I have a new black neighbor. I go by, he's in his yard all the time. He's got a great garden. I'm always looking at the garden, and he looks at me, and he looks at me hard. So I finally rolled the window down the other day. I said, man, your grass looks great. Your yard looks great. And he smiled, and he said, thank you. I said, keep it going, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But I could feel the tension. And so, but that's not the way in Charleston, the Low Country, we had a simpatico relationship that we were all raised with in our generation. So that was never an issue with me, on Walden Law and John Zahn and James Zahn in the city. We have to also realize for those of us who are from here, like Skipper and from Lynn, that that's not the way it is throughout the nation.
Right.
And so we have to also acknowledge that because everybody who lives here is not from here.
True.
Thank you.
There's something about making contact with our eyes, particularly now since we can't hug and touch and handshake and do the things we would normally do. A moment when your eyes connect can be very, very powerful because it says, I see you. And what you hear, and I know you've heard, like I've heard over and over and over in the media and in everything that's going on right now, is that's one of the things people want most. They just want to be seen. And what better way to do that than to connect with our eyes around these masks?
Yeah. Let's get Andy in the back, and then we'll come to you,
And then
please.
we'll come back up.
Hi, I'm Andy Rankin, and I've had this thought in the back of my mind for a long time is, and I don't have it all put together. David probably needs your help, and everyone in this room actually, but I think we need to do a better job of an outreach to the historical black colleges and universities, particularly in our state. I know I'm totally career focused, long-term career focused, and I don't know what that looks like. I've volunteered for the College of Charleston on the Alumni Association for many years. And I know we have an aggressive recruiting initiative, if you will, for certain out-of-state students. But I'm kind of envisioning starting, at the freshman level and working up through, all 4 years senior level to show the quality of jobs that can be found in the hospitality industry. That's something we have to, no matter the color of your skin, we have to fight against, manufacturing and doctors and lawyers to show that there are good jobs in the hospitality industry. But I'd like to start, like I said, at the younger age, and not that we've ignored the historical black colleges and universities. It's just, I think we've all gotten into a comfort zone of the three big hospitality schools here in town, College of Charleston, of course, but of course USC, our own graduate, Annie McEwen, and of course Clemson's Parks, Recreation, Tourism. So I'd like to expand the focus, even though these schools might not have a dedicated tourism track, but with y'all's help, we could set up internships at your businesses and just start the awareness. So.
Andy, I am so glad, number one, you brought that up.
Yes.
Mark, you can pass the mic. I won't kick a question back, but I do want to reflect as you come forward for a comment here.
Okay.
Working with organizations I just want to share this that I've seen repeatedly to spark your own thoughts about your organization. One, we start hearing the excuses. Well, we don't get the candidates that we would like for the diversity we would like. And when I ask back the question, can you show me the historical black colleges and universities you have been recruiting from? Can you show me the list of high schools that you are recruiting from? Guess what? It exactly points out that fact. But it's so easy to fall into a trap to say we just can't get the candidates, and yet some of our actions weren't going to the right place to get the good candidates. The next thing that I want to prod you is I've looked at studies that showed, show me how many applied, show me how many were interviewed. Guess what happens? The unconscious brain of selection takes place, and the appropriate percentage wasn't even brought in for an interview. Then we study how many brought in for an interview to job acceptance. Guess what? The unconscious brain takes over, and it is amazing to watch the deselection process that rationally nobody thought was there, but the numbers show it. So thank you for raising that. It is absolutely an action we can be more vigilant about. Yes.
I just wanted to go back to
Thank you, Mark.
the eye contact that you were talking about. I was just discussing that with the two partners. After the situation happened downtown with the rioting and stuff, my daughter works at the Athlete's Foot on King Street, so they basically burnt that building inside. So that's her part-time job. She goes to the College of Charleston. So that Sunday morning, she called and said, "Mom, can y'all come and help us clean up, such and such and such?" So me and my 15-year-old went down there, but we got there before her, so I said, well, let's just walk to the CVB. We can go use the bathroom, get some water, and we'll come back. From Calhoun Street, from that side where the Athlete's Foot is at, all the way up to John Street. We're walking, people was out there, nodding. When we got to the visitor center, my daughter said to me, "Mama, did you realize something?" I said, "What, baby?" She said, "No one spoke to us." Wow. She was 100% correct, because me, being the person I am, they gave me eye contact, and I nod, I say good morning, but this is what I got.
Wow.
And my 15-year-old experienced that day, full sight. And I was just telling them, when don't put everybody in the same category.
Right.
Because you don't have to have a conversation, but if I say good morning or hi and I nod and you're looking at me, you're physically looking me in my eyes, and you turn away or put your head down, I've done my part. So the good thing I was telling them, when we were going back, we tried the other side of the street just to see. It happened again. And I made it my point to really talk more, but it happened again. But this is the good part. When we got back to the store, a gentleman pulled in front of the door, and his wife and daughter bringing the store, asking if we need water, if we need help, and whatever like that. And me and my daughter was standing on the sidewalk, and I was talking to the wife and the daughter in the truck. And I was telling the lady, I appreciate you all doing that, because what my daughter just dealt with. She said, "What happened?" So I told her. And the husband he was sitting in the car. He came back out the car. The wife got out the car. The daughter got out the car. And they all hugged me and my daughter. And it was overwhelming, because I wanted my daughter to see that everybody is not like this.
Right.
So don't let this one experience stop you from being kind to people. Right. But that's when the news was on and everybody's in Charleston as a family. That's what happened to my 15-year-old that Sunday morning.
Wow.
So it's hard,
Yes.
but like you say, we have to move forward. And I told him, the first thing I said, I'm just tired, because this is nothing new for us.
Right.
To be honest.
Right.
I just think people now are just taking it to a whole different level that I'm not accustomed to. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for sharing. Your story doesn't need any follow-up. It's powerful and it's true, and I appreciate that, we're reminded that not everyone has the same experience and they're not all positive. Thank you.
I'm Barbara Pace, and I just wanted to thank you, Nay, for sharing that experience, because that's fresh, but it's also old. And I thank you so much for doing that this day.
And because we're in this space like this, I want to remind you all that there are probably 10 more stories just like that any person of color living in Charleston could share with you or wherever you are. And what's important about what happens in those moments is that we allow people to tell the story. Again, more important than anything is then the impact of what hearing that story has on us when we think about the next time we interact with someone. So we have to pause, even if it's rush time, even if there are folks there waiting. If someone needs to share, like Nay, is that correct? Just did. We've got to allow space right now for that to happen. And you can't say, oh, no, not right now, I'm busy, talk to me tomorrow, because tomorrow may not come. And the impact you have on ignoring the opportunity to hear that story may be lost forever if you don't find the space and the time to do that. So again, thank you for sharing.
Underscoring Willette's comments, we so often try to silver lining that story. We try to defend the story. We try to apologize for the story. That's not necessarily helpful. The thank you for the story is helpful.
It is.
So thank you for your response. Long ago, I had a person tell me a story that resonated where, have you ever opened the door for someone and they walk through as if, and your tendency was to say, thank you.
Yes.
Your tendency was to close that door a little bit faster so it might just bump them in the backside. Just some recognition that an act was done, no acknowledgement of the act was received. And boy, did somebody put me in my place, and they said, if the act was done genuinely,
don't need that.
You need an acknowledgement. We never know where someone else may be.
Right.
And if they are in a ditch, we don't know if that ditch is 6 feet deep or 100 feet deep. So we may offer that first line of support, the hand to lift up, and it's not received. That's okay, because we don't know where they are. It may be the 5th reach out that all of a sudden someone looks and says, thank you. Thank you for that. I needed that today. But the other 4 people in front never saw that. We don't have to. What we do have a sense is what is right, what's in our value system, what can we extend, and hope that we all have the patience and a little bit of the forgiveness and the grace to extend to say, if it's something I don't understand, I can say that. If it's something I don't know how to help, just be there. It's a very important part of it all.
A couple more?
Yeah.
And then we'll check in with our virtual community. I think Chris may have some things posted. Anyone else want to share?
Love to hear your actions. I'm taking this to keep a list of the ones that we hear verbally, because we don't have paper today to capture them all. So this is a really important time that if you came up with an action, thank you.
We'll go here, and then I think Chris has a couple on the chat. David? Thank you.
I think it's going to be important to address maybe it's the high school kids or whatever in the black community, to get them to understand that they are worth applying for certain jobs. It might have changed. I don't do the hiring anymore at my restaurants. I don't. But many, many years ago when I was involved, and I don't put ads, even currently, we just put ads on social media and so forth. And I can't begin to tell you that when a young black person comes in for a job, I would say, hi, you here for the waitress job or the waiter's job? No, I'm looking for a job in the kitchen. Well, you sure? Yeah, I can't do that. I'm in the kitchen. And I hired one young black lady years ago, and Kim Lee, and Kim was such a great waitress. She had, what a personality. For years, she worked for me for many years, and for the longest period of time, I kept saying, well, Kim, be a manager. No, I can't do that. I said, sure you can. Come on, you can be a manager. No, that's not me. Finally, I convinced her, and she did a great job. And we keep in touch even now, many, many years later. But it's just so frustrating because they won't come in and apply for a front of the house position. And I guess it's the mentality that being in the South, I don't understand it totally. I talk to everybody. I talk to anybody. Eye contact, the whole thing. In fact, my nickname when I was a kid was Motor Mouth because I can't shut up. My wife, after our first date, she said, do you ever stop talking? And I said, no. And so there's not a person I won't talk to.
Right.
And I just don't, I just don't understand things sometimes.
I think part of the answer goes back to what the gentleman in the back, I think you said Andy? Said it's creating these pipeline internships, fellowships, opportunities that allow young people to actually see themselves in the roles. Some of that is a response to that. Now there is no one answer, but I can assure you that if we can begin to get these young children, black, brown, whatever, into these roles early as interns, as fellows, as people who shadow folks doing the things that they might not see themselves doing, they begin to then recognize that there's an opportunity here for me. That's one possibility for things that we can do. And I will stop and then we'll go to the other. Here's what I also know about hiring, and no matter the industry, we still hire people based upon who we know and the connections that we have. I've got a son with a JD. And he says to me right now, Mom, if it was not for you and the people you have allowed me to meet, even with 4 degrees as a black man, I know I wouldn't be able to do the things that I do now. Why should my connection as his mother have afforded him the opportunities when he's a young black man, 40 years old, with 4 college degrees? But he will admit, and he'll tell anybody, it's because of my mom and the people my mom knows. Although I'm talented. So one of the things we have to do in our industries is we've got to get beyond this blind spot that helps us continue to perpetuate hiring and training the familiar. And I'm not saying we do that intentionally. I'm going back to the whole conversation around blind spots. We're going to always go to what's comfortable. That potential young black person that you may hire for something more that gives a better salary and that has more status in the industry is stuck in that place potentially because they haven't been given the opportunity through any kind of connection with other human beings to see themselves doing anything but being in the kitchen. You can afford all of those folks that kind of opportunity by doing this. And here's my challenge to you. You've got people of color working for you. They have children and grandchildren and nieces and nephews. Invite them to invite their children into your space in some type of shadowing, internship, fellowship opportunity. Because that's how they're going to be able to see themselves in those spaces. You're working with tons of people of color. Begin by connecting first with them and their connections, because that's how people get hired. You want to move black folks from the whatever descriptor we have, the back of the house to the front of the house in the industry, however that language works, which quite honestly makes me shrug sometimes, but that's the culture of the industry. But you want to bring people forward. You've got hundreds of people right now working for you who have children that you can begin to shadow and mentor and bring into the fold in these higher level kinds of opportunities if you start with them early. That's just one opportunity and one challenge I will share with you, because we're going to continue to hire people based upon who you know. And if you know me and I'm Willette, and I've got a 9th grader, now I'm working for you in the kitchen, but my 9th grader wants to be a chef, what better connection? Because guess what you're going to do? You're going to trust, because you know me, that my ninth grader has the values and the belief systems, because you've seen them in me, that you want to bring into the industry. And you're more likely to hire my ninth grader than any other ninth grader walking off the street, because you and I have already made a connection. And that's how it's going to begin to change and shift. We had a comment here, and then we're going to go to Chris. I apologize. Please.
Well, what I was going to add was there's a little interesting piece of history I'd like to add. So right about 20 years ago, when I was at Charleston Place, I got a call from the city of Charleston, and Mayor Riley wanted to know, he wanted to put together a blue ribbon committee to find out why we didn't have more black folk who were involved in the front of the house, in the industry. And so what that came up to, the answers were that the generation before them, which were the entire black staff at Perdidas, there was not a white person who served on the floor of Perdidas, at Henry's, at the Yacht Club, at the Country Club, at the Colony House. All those folks wanted to educate their children so they didn't have to be waiters. And so in this town, this little small town of 30, 40 years ago, before we had Blackbaud and Benefit Focus, and all these people moved here, that was what they wanted their people to be better. And they educated their people not to be in the service industry.
Right.
So when you go to Savannah, it didn't happen there. It didn't happen in Atlanta. And their part of the hospitality industry in those cities is a key, integral part in New Orleans.
Yeah.
It's a profession. It's something to be proud of. But we had a little skip in generation there. So it is a new thing for us to think about, because we haven't seen that participation in the front of the house, because then it was seen as serving white people.
Right.
And we have a little skip in generation there that we have to kind of think about, absorb, and make that change and acknowledge.
Yeah, thank you for that history, and it makes
Mark,
a
as we
lot
go
of
to the
sense.
online, I would love if you'd share some comments about Heart for Hospitality, some of the efforts that
Pipelines.
are being made already but could greatly be expanded in particularly our high school. But if you'd speak a little bit about that.
Sure. So a lot of these things, our Heart for Hospitality Advisory Committee has challenged us to go into. The HBCU component is the newest one that we'll make an initiative to adding that to our workforce development recruitment. We are formalizing that right now, but we believe strongly in mentorship. So this is something that I serve as a mentor, and that we are engaging in levels of high school and figure out that we have to go as far into as middle school to make that entry level, to kind of show the vast variety of jobs within the hospitality industry, because now we see that there's no one out there to in the career pathway to point out what careers are available, because people just, the stigma, like you mentioned, was you're only a server in the hospitality industry, and they don't know about the plethora of jobs that's offered. So we're trying to educate the educators and helping us help them by shining a light on those opportunities. I, being a proud member of HBCU right here in the state of South Carolina, Morris College, the same way Willette mentioned, was given that same kind of opportunity that I worked my way up, and someone saw the values in me to say, you know, consider doing this, and this is how I got to be working in diversity and inclusion. So I know that that formula does work. Just wanted to share that there's different pillars that we're working on simultaneously, also talking about with our HR group and how to how to go and hire people that don't look like your normal fit, those kind of things that you should work with. So we're working on a couple of different things, and those should be some webinars that we hope to roll out pretty soon. So be on the lookout for those kind of things from our group.
And Mark, I'll make a statement. Watching a lot of the efforts that Mark's been associated with and helping lead through Heart for Hospitality, we have gone into high schools and worked with the counselors. We have gone into the religious community and worked with identification of those that we can have a connection to and bring into the industry. And suffice to say, but you layer it with your own words, it isn't easy. What we thought would be request, educate, ask, and here they come, it's not that easy, is it?
No. Yeah.
But we will keep doing it.
Yep.
and keep building on it, and it is a building process. We can be that first domino to fall for others to go. Chris, some of the online comments or input.
Several of these piggyback onto Willette, what you were commenting on earlier. More specifically, in terms of that front and back of house conversation, we need to address the disparity between the pay rates in these front and back of house jobs and how these different groups see themselves and the career pathways in the industry. Another is overall diversity in the C-suite and on executive teams, how we ensure more diverse candidates are considered, more diverse people are represented in those positions. A three-step process, one person recommended, making sure all leaders are aligned and ensuring all people want the change. Gut check the change with frontline managers and employees. Being clear doesn't mean those around you are ready, and then you have to move quickly. And then a fourth suggestion is taking a bit of a different approach, considering how diversity is reflected in our marketing of businesses, social media, print, and online pieces.
Very good. Thank you.
Great comments. Yes, May.
I don't know how many of you know Dwayne Parrish. I think everybody does, right? He was the first person to give me a job in the hospitality at the Francis Marion Hotel when they reopened. I didn't have any hotel experience at all, none. And I applied for the PBX operator, and he hired me. Being under Dwayne Parrish, I went from the PBX operator to reservations, from reservations to reservations manager. Like you said, all was in the bag. But I told him I wanted to interact with the guests. So he said, "You want to?" I said, "Yeah, I would like to do that. I think I can do that." I don't know what Dwayne did, what he did, but I know 2 weeks after that conversation, he said, "Nay, you're going on the front desk." And I still have that picture of the postcard that they made when the Francis Marion opened. Wow. And I was the only black person in that picture on the front desk.
Wow.
Because when I told my friends, "You work in the front desk?" they were astonished because they said that.
No one had ever done it.
Right. So I give my props to Dwayne Parrish because he's the reason why I'm in hospitality.
Congratulations.
Great
Yes.
story. It's awesome.
And it's about that human connection for sure.
I would invite you that if you had heard an idea or shared an idea that you would like to be sure it was recorded and maybe did not have the chance to speak out, for our virtual community, they've put them online. If you would write it down on the piece of paper you had in your chair and just leave it so that we can collect those and keep a more complete list. It's not the work that's done in 8 minutes and 46 seconds in this room.
Right.
It's the work we walk out of this room and we start to do in our community pockets that we live. What Willette and I would like to do is end with a final question we prepped for, which is enter one word to describe how you're leaving today's session. Again, you may enter as many words as you like, but one word, send, one word, send. And we'll form another word cloud about how we feel having spent about an hour and 45 minutes just having this sort of open dialogue, listening, and education. Wow.
Thankful. Hopeful.
If you're unfamiliar with it, I also invite, if you see a word up there that speaks to you, retype it in and send. It helps us prioritize the types of things we do, how helpful these may be. As you continue to think of words and send them in, also online, just a couple of closing comments from our end. Number one, thank you. Thank you for your candor, the honest sharing. Thank you for taking the step to attend, even if you're at home or in your office attending. These are so important to begin this process, not just of healing. That's just a small part of the process, is the healing, and we aren't there yet. But really to having change take place, to then holding accountability against that change, and it's something we absolutely believe we can do. Willette and I have walked alongside with other communities and watched the change take place. It is certainly not overnight. It is not in a couple of months. It takes years. And sometimes in that slow change, we don't even realize it's taken place until you look back and say, wow, look at all the things that have changed. So if you can step into this with the endurance to see it through, we are very hopeful.
Yes.
Because we've had a chance to watch these changes take place. So I'm thrilled to see that the single largest word up there is the hope that you feel, and how different that is maybe from the first slide of how we were all feeling over this last week. Willette?
Yeah, and I will say to those of you who are feeling fuzzy and unclear, I'm a D&I strategist. You know, that's the label people have put on me. And I'm fuzzy. Every day for the last 4 months, I've never been in such a fog, because you don't know whether the next thing you do when people look to you for the answers is going to trigger something unintended and be interpreted in a way that impacts folks in a way that you only thought would be, I'm sorry, virtual world, I keep touching my mic, would be helpful. So fuzzy is okay. Unclear, because to own that means we're working towards figuring out how to unfuzz and get some clarity around those things. So here's what I would say to those of us. Here's what I'm doing to get out of the fog and find clarity every day. Find the thing that connects you to whatever connects you outside of your work, first and foremost. You know, for me, that's prayer. For me, that's sometimes it's a nice glass of red wine, whatever works for you. And then write down what still is unclear or where the fog is setting in. Just write it down. And then, to the best of your ability, put what you think is the best answer for the confusion and the fuzziness and the unclarity, because that's your answer. And what I've discovered is when I write it down and I look at it, sometimes I'll go, oh, no, that doesn't make any sense. But sometimes I also go, wow, I'm going to try that. Because I've discovered when I put it in writing and then I put it into action, it usually turns out pretty well. But the other thing you're going to have to do, and I'm talking for those of you who are in the room who are fuzzy or unclear, as I still am, you're going to have to be okay with saying, you know, I tried that and it didn't work out, and I'm so sorry. You know, I'm still in the fog. She'll figure it out, so please forgive me. That didn't work the way I thought it would. Can we back up and punt and do this again? You can't stay fuzzy and be immobilized by the fuzziness and the unclarity, or be afraid to take the risks that we talked about earlier today. Take the risks. When it doesn't turn out well, back up and say, oh, messed up. Yeah, I know I'm your strategist, but in this moment, that didn't work. Give me another chance. And then don't be afraid to try it again and again and again until you get yourselves and others to the place where you both are in agreement around what that outcome should look like. So be okay with the fuzziness, remember, because that takes us back to the blind spots. Be okay with unclarity, because it'll get us to hopeful too. And while hopeful is the biggest one out there, I felt like I had to address that one because I don't want there to be any shame around the fuzziness. And again, if I can do this and get paid to do it and I'm still fuzzy, I can't imagine what your worlds must be like when that's not even in your title. So it's okay to be fuzzy, and it's okay to still be fearful and unclear. Just don't let it immobilize you. That's when it becomes a problem, when you don't take that and do something with it. Those are my comments.
So as unclear as we all are,
clear as mud.
There are some things we're very clear about.
Yes.
We have broken trust out there. And trust you can't ask for. Trust is a back end that results from truth. You can speak with truth, and if you do it with love, compassion, empathy, and respect, I guarantee you it will advance the pathway that we're on.
Yes.
Thank you for being with us today.
you so
Please carry this out. Let us know what can be most helpful that we Explore Charleston, their resources. I want to say a special thank to Tony in the back who has signed for our audience today.
Thank you, Tony.
And appreciate all that you've done to be here. Our AV crew is absolutely stellar. Thank you for what
Thank you,
you've done.
Thank you.
Let's go out and just be a bigger part of the change. So thanks for being here today.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you, guys.